So we should be live right about now. So hello everybody. How is everybody going? I hope somebody's keeping an eye on the chat because
I'm going
I
there
won't be
right now.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. So hello everybody. As usual, joined today with Dorian and Loki's Witch, and we'll sorry. And we'll be giving an update on, I think it was almost a month ago, maybe we had talked about Dungeons and Dragons, playing it online. You guys remember?
Yep.
Yeah, it was about a month ago. So we talked some more about it, and we're thinking probably what would be the best thing to do is to have people actually join us in the Hangout. And I think we can have up to 9 people in the Hangout. So if you're interested in playing, contact Loki and let her know, and also let us know in the chat, and we're going to give an update on March 7th and have it fleshed out more. But if you're interested in joining us, let us know. So what we would do is probably sometime maybe in the middle of March, instead of having usual Heathen Haven where we watch videos, we'll actually come on and people join us on here, and we'll go on a campaign that Loki's been working on. And I don't want to give any details away, but it's going to be funny. Let's just put it that way.
If you are interested, besides sending me a message, you can start working on your character. Mind you, your character needs to be designed around you as a person and what class or anything that you would personally want to do. As your
could you give an example?
Like say I really wanted to be a ranger one day in my life, and you know what? I'm going to make myself a ranger in this game. You'll go by your actual name, or you can change your name up a bit, like Sir Hellbound or something like that.
Sir Hellbound.
Or Sir Dorian. Or
I'm going to be a Canadian lumberjack I'm going to be a Canadian lumberjack ninja. That's my class, though.
It has to be a class out of the rule book, and that's the 5th edition.
And Canadians get a plus two to charisma, right?
Canadians actually will get a
100%
plus 2 to
charisma rate.
No, you get a plus 2 to charisma because you guys say sorry a lot.
And yeah, well, my name will be superfluous. I'll be the unnecessary extra person in the party.
Sir, what am I doing here? Where's my pudding?
Or you could have a highly cynical and questionable knight named Sir. Oh, I just lost my train of thought.
Come on, Grandpa. It's okay.
Oh, I can totally see Hellbound being the paladin that's like, look, I'm the atheist paladin, which you can be an atheist paladin. So, because this is a handbook you're looking for.
How would I convert people to a belief system that I don't have any faith in?
You don't have to anymore as a paladin.
You don't?
No, you don't even have to have an... You can have whatever
dumb
alignment as well, as long as it's weird. They actually changed up the paladin for that reason. But you can really convert people to believe in being atheists if you wanted to, because it's better.
That's just dumb. So those of you who may not know, I don't know if Dorian knows. So a paladin is sort of like a holy knight, and he's given all these special abilities and special powers through his supposed chosen deity. So like they're able to like lay hands on people and heal them. They have like a radius of protection. At least they used to. I don't know what the hell they have now. But anyhow, they used to have all these abilities given to them by a deity. And now if you have an atheistic paladin, how would that work?
Well, it can also be considered like a fallen paladin too. So, which you can actually do that at a certain level.
Yeah, but they called those an anti-paladin.
Anti-pallies? Yeah. I had one that set things on fire. Let's see. Class restrictions. I take that back. You're going to have a god.
I thought so.
Just practice Dorianism. Very popular among young people today.
Yes.
Yeah, because I forgot you draw your some of your spells and stuff from your pantheon of belief, but you can have any of the deities. You can have a chaotic neutral deity, and you yourself can be chaotic neutral. Basically, you're just a fighter for a knight for that deity. So
Right.
And
so, are we getting any feedback in the chat? Are people saying that they're interested in this, or?
Let's see.
We got AKA Blackguard. I am Surrender.
Yeah, I want to
I'm
be
completely lost.
bored. I've won. So far, I'm seeing about at least one or two. So
perfect. Oh, good. Yeah, because I mean, if we have too many people in here, it'll get chaotic. But one or two, yeah, I mean that's perfect. So, what do you think? You think people can get a hold of you, Loki?
Yes, the best way to get a hold of me is Twitter, and if not, I will give my link to my my page on Facebook, not my actual person page. Or just shoot me an email and I'll put my email in one of the things.
You could have people contact Heathen Haven, right? Can't they send a direct message to us?
I think so. I'm not sure.
That way you don't have to give out your personal email if you don't want to.
Oh, I don't mind. I get mostly spam mail in it anyways.
Okay, all right. Well, whatever works for you.
I'll put it on the description
my apologies.
later.
I'll be right back.
Actually, all the information is in our description. Earlier, I put all of our Twitters and our YouTube channels in there, so people can message us, no problem.
Okay, they can message those things. And I'm putting my email real quick in the chat so that for people who doesn't have Twitter can email me.
Who doesn't have Twitter? Even Russia has like a bazillion bots and stuff like that. So,
well, the upside about my email is I get it on my phone. Just make sure you put your name in the subject so that I can know who you are.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, all right. Well, cool. So get a hold of Loki, and then, like I said, we'll have another update. We'll hammer it down with more details on the 7th. But we're hoping by the 7th of March, we'll have an idea of how many people want to play, and also we'll see if maybe what we could do is, like, let's say, a couple of months down the line, or a week down the line, or whatever, because we'll probably only be able to do this once a week.
Yeah.
Or maybe even less. Well, we'll see. But
you mean once a month, not once a week?
Right. Yeah. Once a month. So, like, let's say somebody wants to join us. So maybe we can figure out some way to do that too. So,
yeah. So the classes that you can look at are Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard.
All right.
And it's, like I said, it's the 5th edition books. This is the starter book that you can find online on a PDF file as well. Okay. I think they're still in black and white. I don't know if they're in color yet on the PDF files, but we'll go into subclasses if we have to.
And where can people find the PDFs?
PDFs, I had to actually Google them. I got most of mine from a friend on a drum drive. Yeah, that's not the hand sign.
It's okay, and I think you sent the link to us in the DM, right? On
At
Twitter
one point, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
You can also, they have the basic rules and some of the layouts for things on Wizard of the Coast, wizardofthecoast.com, or wizard.com, because, well, that's their official actual site for the D&D.
Mm-hmm.
The 5th edition players handbooks, I actually have found a site where you can actually download it. Just be careful where you download it at. I'm sending, I don't know if I can post it in the chat. I will try.
You should be able to, because
because I'm allowed to post links.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can get it, and you can actually look at it via this link, because this is actually the link for it. Might not, and you can also download it from here.
Okay.
So
cool.
that is the player's handbook.
Awesome. Thanks. All right.
love
So looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. So what are people's thoughts? How's everything been going? I know it hasn't been that crazy of a news week. Anything stick out for anybody?
Something about a shooting. That's about it.
Oh yeah, the shooting. Yeah.
And my school going through lockdown drills every other day.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of a good thing.
It's a repercussion of it.
Yeah.
And it's sad and a tragedy of what happened.
Yeah, because it's funny because not when I went to high school, but I learned later on, like, because some of the schools in Oakland have they actually have metal detectors, and it's almost like lockdown when people go into the school. So it's I don't know. I think a lot more schools are going to get that way. They're going to start, you have to go through a metal detector, and they might even have guards there. And it's a shame, but that's what we got to do to protect our kids,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the things that frustrated me the most about this incident was how everybody was so quick to, like, lasso onto this guy and use him as a pawn against their other side. You had the liberals doing it on one side, then you had well, actually pretty much the liberals. I didn't really see it on the conservative side, but definitely on the liberal side, they were so quick to assume that he was some kind of a trained white supremacist who carried out this act to kill multiple races of people. I mean, that's the thing that I don't understand. Whenever they do these things, they label people as white nationalists. It's like, is that just like the first thing that jumps into their fucking mind?
Yep.
It's so insane.
It is, and in the end, it is a tragedy of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it does, I hate to say it, there's no, well, we should have this, we should have that. We should, and obviously neither side can agree on it, and that's the problem, is we need to come to a compromise and an agreement.
On what?
On figuring out a good way to maybe help try to prevent these things from happening again.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which, it's one of those hard topics of how do you prevent this, and how do you make it to where everyone's happy with how you're preventing it? That's the bigger problem. I think really more of what it is an actual solution to the problem. Like I said, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow, but I don't know if there's exactly a permanent solution, which would, let's say, completely eliminate all mass murders, I guess is the best way to describe it. I think the only thing we can do is we can try to prevent it as much as we possibly can, so that whoever is a victim, we try to minimize the most amount of casualties. I mean, that's kind of like the way that I look at it. I don't think we'll ever have a complete perfect solution, because I think we're always going to have psycho whack nuts who are going to try and kill other people one way or the other, whether they can use a knife, a gun, or a truck, or a bomb. Yep. That's just, sadly, that's just the way it is. There's always going to be someone out there who gets around or gets through the loopholes or finds a way to get a hold of something. Mm-hmm. And that's just the reality of life. And I hate the fact that kids are doing this to each other. I hate the fact that adults are doing this, but it is the society we live in, sadly. And we just have to do what we can do to protect more people as much as we can. And I know lockdown drills do help. I know that practicing these drills more often is a better thing, because apparently they did have a lockdown drill that day. And then when the thing went off again for another lockdown, a few people didn't realize that it was an actual lockdown and not a drill.
Right. Yeah.
And that was the bigger problem right there. And in a way, it's partially the staff's fault at the same time for not realizing that this is the second time this is going off. It's probably not a drill. I need to keep my students in my classroom. I need to do what we're supposed to do. Some teachers just said, oh, it's probably a fluke. Go ahead and go, which was what was the worst thing that happened. But we did see, I have seen some stories of some of the heroes that came out of it. I mean, I don't even want to bother looking up this piece of garbage's name for what he did. I don't want to give him two thoughts in my mind besides the fact that he's a piece of garbage for what he did to everyone in that school and the lives he took. Yes, he does need mental help, but still, I look back on some of the heroes and some of the people who did what they could to save as many lives as possible.
Yeah.
And two good teachers gave their lives protecting students.
Yeah.
Along with many other people were hurt. So
what are your thoughts, Dorian? You're up in Canada, you don't experience this, do you?
No, we get more knife attacks and stuff like that up here. So, and the way I see it, all the extra gun laws that people want to put in place, that's only going to stop people who already obey the gun laws.
Yeah.
I'm all in favor for like background checks and stuff like that for when you apply to get a gun, because guns make it, although guns don't kill people, it makes it easier for people to kill people. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before and people kind of laughed and thought I was joking, but we should really control bullets because, you know, first of all, you have to go in, you have to purchase bullets. And, you know, you don't need 6,000 rounds of bullets if you're just going to go to the range. You know, maybe you do, but, you know, you really don't. And that can be kind of an alarm for people, but also they could mark the bullets. They could limit how many bullets you actually get. You know, I mean, I think we should make gun access tougher. You know, I don't think we can ban guns outright, unfortunately, in America at this point, because there's just so many guns out there. I mean, I've known people who have purchased illegal firearms. It's not that difficult. And there's a huge black market for guns, you know, and that's just the way it is. I don't think we're ever going to be able to, like, if we passed a law tomorrow banning guns in America, it would take an awful long time to make even a slight impact, because the guns that are out there and they're illegal, you know. And anyhow, and people aren't going to just like give up their guns, you know. So, unfortunately, that's just not going to happen. But I also don't believe that, you know, a 19-year-old kid who's filled with piss and vinegar should be able to slap down a visa at a gun store and walk out with an AK-47. I mean, that's just ridiculous, you know. I think that background checks are definitely necessary. You know, I mean, if I wanted to go and purchase a gun right now, I mean, it would be a good thing if I had to wait a couple of weeks, you know, because you never know what state of mind somebody currently is in. And, you know, as we all know, our feelings and the emotions that we sit with in this moment will pass, you know, if we give it time.
Oh yeah, but if you want to kill someone, you're going to find a way.
Yeah.
As grim as, like, as weird as that is to say, it's not going to stop anything, but there are ways to make it harder for someone to kill someone. So
yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I agree. It should be much more difficult.
I mean, I'm with you on the stricter control over ammunition. I mean, you need to not only do that with the bullets themselves, but with the materials to make it as well. Because it is very cheap to buy the materials to make bullets. The gunpowder can be, buy in bulk, you can get a decent discount along with the shells. And that's another problem we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think most of those people, they actually have bullet things. I mean, I don't know exactly how it's done, but I'm pretty sure you can't just make a bullet out of just, your basic materials. You probably have to have certain materials like, well, empty casings. What do you call it? The initial striker that ignites the gunpowder that's in a bullet, and then obviously then the gunpowder itself, and also that gunpowder has to be measured and made correctly. So I mean, all of those, yes, you could make your own bullets, but those would be traceable. It would be much easier to trace bullets that are handmade. So yeah, I agree with you, because I've encountered that argument before, but it would definitely reduce it, even if we did have people making their own bullets.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that, granted, you can have all the background checks in the world and a person can pass them with no problem, but it's getting a hold of materials can be a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
Or getting a hold of the actual thing, because as my mom always said, a gun doesn't kill a person. It's the ammunition and the person's intent behind it that kills them. It's a person holding the weapon that is doing the killing. The weapon is just a tool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's what it ultimately comes down to, is why somebody has to do it in the first place. I mean, there are people who just lack, there's a term for them. They're either social, crap, my brain is
sociopaths.
Yeah, sociopaths. And there's another, my brain's not working.
There's
sociopaths, and then there's homicidal. Anyhow, there's all
psychopaths.
Right, yeah, psychopaths, and then there's homicidal maniacs, and I mean, there's all kinds of various people. But those people, they just lack empathy. They just don't care, And I mean, yeah, we'll always have those people. But anyhow, gently moving away from this subject. Anything else been going on? And then we'll get to a video.
Besides my friend Brandy up from California for 2 weeks and random snow and rainstorms this whole week. Not much for me. Dorian?
So we were going to have a guest this week, weren't we, Loki?
Yes, they're not feeling well right now.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh, I'm just surviving up here, man. I got minus 30 degrees C weather like all week, so...
Right, wow. You're talking Canadian.
All right, so if I went to F and stuff like that, I'm looking at minus... Oh, I guess, yeah, about minus 20 F for you guys, that'd be, so...
F you.
Ooh,
F.
I thought my weather sucked.
Trying to look. We've been having some terrible, horrible weather here in California. Yesterday it dipped below 70. It was terrible.
Oh no, 70. It's below 70 in California. Whatever will we do?
We just had like a little heat wave almost. It seemed that way. It was just beautiful. It was like a spring day last week.
See, Brandy, you're not missing anything in California. It just went below 70. That's all. Black Panther opened up. They live in Riverside.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's north of here.
So, river crime.
So what?
They call it river crime.
River crime? Why river crime?
Well, if you've ever been to Riverside, you'd understand.
Oh, okay. I guess okay. I had to be there, huh?
You don't go for a walk at night or even during the day. Maybe it's not the best place in California.
It's a lot better than San Bernardino.
It's better than San Bernardino.
Well, okay.
It's about a step above, but barely, like a little hop.
Like a slight hop, huh? Okay.
Yeah, it's less dangerous than San Bernardino. Actually, no, it's safer than San Bernardino, but more dangerous than Hemet. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that's quite a fun little scale to try and figure out.
Yeah. If you're not from California or been to those places, you're like, what the hell is Hemet? where people really
So, all right. So
Oh,
I feel
you
like
Americans are funny.
I feel like we don't interact with the chat enough. So
well,
we got quite a lot of people in here. So does anybody
yes.
have any questions for us or thoughts?
Real quick, I want to say to Jack Voodoo, thank you for being an officer with integrity and helping others. I mean, you don't run into that very often, and I'm thankful that there is an actual officer that loves his job that's actually in the chat talking. So
You mean
I know
a police officer?
Yep.
See, I disagree with you, Loki. I think the majority of police officers are decent people. I think
they are, but
Yeah,
I've run into some really bad ones lately.
Yeah, we all usually when you encounter a police officer, you're probably not in the best of moods. Either you have to engage in an officer or against your will, you have to engage an officer. So yeah.
Unfortunately for us, there was a knife wielding maniac on the school campus while we were doing overtime at like 2 a.m. That was fun.
Yeah. I mean, I hated all the police officers I had to interact with in my youth, but later on, when I no longer had to interact with police officers, and the couple of times I did interact with police officers, yeah,
it
was a completely different approach, and all of a sudden they seem like nice people.
Jack is actually asking, do any of us own a firearm? Yes.
Dorian?
I don't, but I have a nice tactical knife collection. So it's a little hard to get guns up here in Canada. So,
and I'm in the plead the fifth. I'm not going to say if I do or if I don't.
I do, and I'm not saying where there are, but most of them are at my parents' house because you can't fly on a plane with a rifle. Yeah.
And the only reason why I say that is because I have had some people online threaten me and stuff like that. So I don't want to give away the secret. I mean, I'm not going to just pull out a gun and just shoot someone. That's just not the way to do it. But I also don't want them to think that I'm defenseless. So that's why I'm saying it that way.
I mean, in my household, yes, there is one. And it's kept safe in a lockbox.
I keep mine next to my baby's crib.
You have... Never mind. Your cat is not your child. Wait.
And I put a little rattle right next to the trigger.
Oh, ouch.
I'm just kidding. I don't have a rattler. So, all right. Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead and get into it. So let me see. Go ahead and screen share.
And I will turn off my camera. Let me get back there real quick.
So I found one. First of all, can you guys see it?
Yes. Lip TV. Yeah, there we go.
The Necronomicon and Government Occult True Believers.
All right. You need to present to everyone, though, because when Dorian talked, it went up on Dorian.
Okay. Thanks. Damn it, Dorian, quit talking.
Sorry, sir.
All right. So now, do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to play with the audio. And hopefully you guys will be able to hear it. Sound a little bit.
Hi, I'm Sean Stone. Join me today as we look into some of the sinister forces haunting America.
Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
Central Intelligence Agency. It was described by witnesses as...
Benda is the author of numerous books, including the series Sinister Forces, and also a couple of books about the Nazis, one on Holy Alliance, and the new bestseller, The Hitler Legacy, now available on Amazon. So he's joining us today to look into many of these occult hidden forces that have haunted his own life, as well as most Americans going back to the end of World War II.
I love how they always say, like, you know, like there's these occult forces, like there's actually some occult groups like out there plotting to overthrow the government. Or
I just love how they do this. That green screen.
Is that a
Make
green?
it look real official. Yeah, or he has like a projector behind him. All I know is that is the worst news-looking green screen I've ever seen.
And what's going on with the shirt here? He's got two things for, you know, putting, you know, to tighten up his shirt, but he's only got one buckle.
No, he has two buckles. The second buckle is the top buckle is pushed upwards, not flat.
But why would you need two? Is one like a backup in case like he's out in the wilderness and it gets ripped off?
It's supposed to be a stylish feng shui thing. It's like with my jacket that I have that have buttons on the side. Those buttons are just there for show. It's pretty much just there for show or fashion or some bullshit like that.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So it's for fashion. And then I love how he's got the leather elbow pads.
Oh, man.
Leather reinforcement around the pockets, you know, just in case somebody rips, you know, a pen out of your shirt.
I don't know, man. Say what you want, but I might have to find one of those for one of my own videos to wear. So
it's not a bad looking shirt, but it's interesting. I can say that much.
Doreen, what you should do is find a shirt with 3 buckles.
Just one up him and stuff like that. Like I'm the in the Occult, we get our 3 buckled shirts over here. So
yes, in the Occult, yes, yeah, that's in the higher degrees. And then the very highest, like the 33rd, 34th degree, that's where you get Velcro.
Oh god, I'm just imagining now, like the higher you go up, you get those shoelaces that are just like those curly ones that auto tie.
No, that's for the novices. The novices have to use shoestrings.
Oh, good God.
And it's going to cover a whole range of topics dealing with everything from the Necronomicon to Islamofascism.
So the Necronomicon, as I'm sure most of you know, is a fantasy book that was written by.
Wasn't it H.P.? No, not H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, H.P. Lovecraft. So the Necronomicon doesn't have anything to do with the occult. The Necronomicon, the book from H.P. Lovecraft, was all made up. He made up that whole mythology. He made up all of that stuff. So the Necronomicon as a title exists, but as for an actual book that exists, no, it doesn't. Even the Egyptian Book of the Dead was not called the Necronomicon.
So stick around as we now interview Peter. Thanks for joining us, Peter Levenda. Pleasure to have you on.
My pleasure.
I wanted to actually start because perhaps the most controversial topic that we can get into on the show, aside from Nazis and Islamic Jihad, is actually the Necronomicon, the history of this Simon book that came out right in the late 60s. And some
Simon the Magus, which is a fictional character by H.P. Lovecraft.
People have said that you actually are Simon. So I want to start by asking you that question. Are you Simon, or do you know who Simon is?
Wait, you didn't say Simon Says. Simon Says, what is the Necronomicon?
I'll answer the first part of your question second, and the second part of your question first. Basically, I know who Simon is, and number one. And number two, no, I'm not.
Okay, so why don't you give us a little bit of the history of what is the Simon Necronomicon? Because many people have heard of Necronomicon in the context of Lovecraft's novels, and they think of it as the totally fictitious version. And yet, some like me actually give credence to the idea that there are ancient Babylonian texts, books of the dead, so-called grimoires, and perhaps the Necronomicon, if not an actual replica, may be based in some of that truth. And the Simon Necronomicon seems to have a lot of basis in real Babylonian lore.
Hold on, pause.
Good.
Raise the Village sent this. H.P. Lovecraft made up the Necronomicon as part of his canon, but a person named Simon wrote the actual book called the Necronomicon, and Simon has said that it's that book was fiction and inspired. The Simon book was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, but also Arthur Crowley and word I can't pronounce, mythology. In any case, it was in fact it is indeed fiction. So basically, somebody named Simon did write the actual book of it, where it was inspired and mentioned in H.P. Lovecraft's stuff with Cthulhu and all of that. Thank you, Rays.
So, okay, so what did he say? He said, H.P. Lovecraft made up the Necronomicon as in part of his canon, but a person named Simon wrote the actual book called the Necronomicon, and Simon has said that book was fiction and inspired by it. The Simon book was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, but also Aleister Crowley and Mesopotamian mythology. In any case, it was intended as fiction. Yeah, I mean, I think what happened after H.P. Lovecraft, God damn it, we can't get back to this thing. Yeah, I mean, Simon de Magus was an actual person who wrote. I mean, there's actually quite a few occult books out there that, you know, there's even some books that they just don't know the origin of it. They don't know what language it's written in. They haven't been able to decipher it. And there's actually a lot of books out there that, you know, where a lot of our occult knowledge comes from, you know. But so my assumption, and I haven't done a whole bunch of research on this, is H.P. Lovecraft based this upon those sort of books. So it was kind of like he used that as a source material, not actually like studying the books, but looking at the mythology and, you know, kind of like the urban legends around those books and use that to mold his story. That's my understanding of it. Now, I could be completely mistaken, but I haven't come across an actual Necronomicon.
Crafts, demonology.
D&D.
So why don't you give us a little bit of the history of where that...
Oop, I'm sorry, what?
I said they have a version for D&D. I mean, that's about the first time I've ever came across this. But that was because it went with the Necromancer class, so yeah. They had it in D&D, but that's about it. I've never seen it in any actual belief or religious text.
Right.
That came from and how you were involved in participating, or at least know who the real Simon is in this story.
Well, this brings us really to the crux of the whole issue, because the discovery of this book, which then became published as the Necronomicon, was undertaken at a time when I was involved with a number of rather mysterious churches in New York City during the late 60s. And it was through one of these churches that these books came to light. It's mentioned in a book called Dead Names, which is sort of a history of what happened, how the Necronomicon came to be in this case. And it was a story of a bunch of boys, young men, teenagers who became priests and bishops in a church during the Vietnam War. Specifically actually creating a church so they would have, number one, a place in which they would explore their interest in esotericism and occultism, as well as in religion. At that point, we weren't quite sure what the difference was between all of these things. And also, it was, quite frankly, it was one way of getting out of the war. So these churches were...
How would that get you out of the draft?
I don't know. I've actually read the whole thing about the Dead Names, the history of Simon's Necronomicon. it's written by the same dude. So that's like me writing my own autobiography and then adding in a whole bunch of wacky things that never happened. So
yeah, I mean, from my understanding, the Necronomicon, the story behind it, the H.P. Lovecraft's version of it, is pretty much based on Abramelin the Mage, who was, you know, supposedly this person who created this book and all this ancient knowledge, and it was sort of based on that. But I'm wondering how creating some kind of a church or being a member of a church would get you out of the draft. I don't understand how that would work.
I don't either. I mean, I don't think anything could have really got you out of the draft except for daddy's money. But it's just like, as far as I knew, they took anyone of any religion. They didn't care.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
You have a pulse, you're male, you're
like,
going.
Nope, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it's just you have a pulse, you're male, you're going. That's pretty much the draft.
Yeah.
Back then, at least.
So, and it's just, it's funny because, you know, I mean, yes, if you had like certain, like, let's say if you had asthma or flat feet or, you know, there were certain things that would not get you drafted. You know, I mean, there's some things that there's certain conditions that if you meet those conditions, you're not going to serve in the military because you're, you know, it's going to be a detriment to the people and to the other people around you. So, but for the most part, yeah, if you've got a pulse and you're a male and you're over the age of 18, chances are you're getting drafted.
Were very popular as means of trying to create a deferment as a clergyman during the war. You had a clergy deferment at that time that existed. It was the 4D deferment. And so we explored all of these options. And
okay, so apparently, so there was some clause or some deferment that if you were in clergy, then you could get out of military service. Okay.
I was a senior in high school at Columbus High School in the Bronx, the same high school that David Berkowitz went to, the son of Sam. He joined a year after I graduated. And at this particular time, in 1968, in June, Bobby Kennedy had just been assassinated. For me, being the type of person that I was a sort of a Kennedy admirer. And when Bobby was killed, this was a tremendous blow. I mean, it looked like that was going to be the end. I mean, they had killed Jack, they had just killed Martin Luther King, and now Bobby Kennedy had been assassinated. And this was a major, the world was going through upheaval at that time. You could not imagine how we all felt, especially those of my age who are now of age to go to Vietnam. And a friend of mine and I, both members of this Erzatz church, this Orthodox church from Czechoslovakia. There's a long story here, and probably we don't have time to go into it. But anyway, we decided we would go down to St. Patrick's Cathedral where the funeral was going to be held, and we would gate crash the funeral. And what we did is we went down the night before. We did go into the...
So this sounds like a very irrelevant story that he's about to get into, but anyhow.
Church, we were allowed into the church. We were dressed appropriately, which means we were dressed as Orthodox monks in black robes and the black conical hat with the veil that comes down, the sort of Never on Sunday or Zorba the Greek kind of outfit. And we walked.
Yes, let's cut to him smiling.
Walked into the church, and we were accepted as though we were actual clergymen of that church. And so we decided the following day for the funeral, we would gate crash, quite frankly. And we hired a limousine. We paid $15. I'll never forget it, for a limousine going one way from the Bronx.
Who fucking cares? Get on with it.
Bronx to Manhattan. And nobody stops a limousine. We got out of the limousine, dressed in our Orthodox finery, and walked into the church. And we found ourselves actually walking into St. Patrick's Cathedral, being led into the sanctuary of the church. My friend on one side of the altar and me on the other, sitting cheek by jowl with all of the actual legitimate priests and bishops who had been invited to this.
Cheek and jowl? How tight were you guys in there? I mean, butt to butt, sure, I can understand that, or hip to hip.
Funeral.
That's just scary.
Yeah, that's really packing them in.
To make a long story short, we were there for the entire service. Because we were the last ones in, we were the first ones out, which meant that we led the procession out of the church. This was a very bizarre experience, I can tell you. The tightest security New York had known because of the assassinations, and we just wandered in as two, high school seniors dressed in, handmade Orthodox robes and managed to defeat security.
What do you mean defeat security? All you did was you just tricked them. I mean, I don't even know how true this story is, but apparently they were able to enter into the church for, the for the service for the President of the United States, who had just recently been murdered. So, yeah, either security was slipping, or they already made up the story, or he actually tricked them.
As we walked out of the church, we made the acquaintance of another bunch of bishops that were outside who could not get in, who were just milling about outside, and they gave us some identification and they gave us some cards and said, "Come and see us." And this was the church in the Bronx that later became the subject of some of the work I did in Sinister Forces. It was a front for an intelligence operation.
Awesome. That is amazing.
Oh, man. All right. Okay, that's...
But this all leads us to the Necronomicon, because as we developed this church structure for ourselves and became more and more involved in it, we attracted other monks of certain disciplines, shall we say, different types of monks who were shopping from one church to another in the Orthodox world.
So, okay. So random church members from different churches and monks from different churches just kind of like, they just wander into other churches. I mean, does anybody have any knowledge of this? Is the first time I've ever heard of, like, let's say a Lutheran priest like wandering into, like, let's say a Catholic mass, and there's no problem with that.
I mean, I know people who go church to church to see what it's like.
But are they actually like clergy? Are they actual clergy?
I've seen a priest that decided to go, who went to a different church because he was asked to join them one Sunday as a guest. But I've never really seen them accidentally just wander into another church. I mean, how do you accidentally wander into another church? I mean, that's the part where I'm a little lost. How do you just accidentally walk in?
Well, I mean, even taking the accidentally part out, I mean, do different denominations of churches just have an exchange of bishops and priests and monks? I mean, is this a common practice?
They don't exchange, no. They do have some that come and visit, see how they do their stuff, and they normally talk because some of the churches do like to be friendly with each other. But I don't ever see them going, well, I'll give you our pastor if you give us your pastor. We'll swap for a week or we'll swap for a year or two. No, they don't do that shit as far as I know. I mean, it's like, hey, look, how about this Catholic priest switches with this rabbi? No, they don't do that.
All right. Well, it just seems kind of odd, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a common practice, but to me, it just seems a little weird.
And two of the monks turned out to be book thieves. These were people who made a...
Two of the monks turned out to be thieves. Okay. Oh, man.
Well, what do you expect if a small town coven will have more security measures than a big church? So
yeah, just like, but it's just so funny. It's just like, okay, and two of the monks just turned out to be thieves, and yeah.
Into libraries, going into private collections, and stealing books and then selling them on the black market. We kind of had a suspicion about this. The friend of mine became the leader of the church because that was really what he was into. And I found out about this a bit later, that his friends were stealing books. And they were stealing a lot of books because they knew he liked occultism. They stole occult manuscripts and books when they could. And one of these was the Necronomicon. It was a box, it was a manuscript written in Greek And I didn't read very much Greek, although the Greek language is part of Orthodoxy. The Greek alphabet is the Cyrillic, the Russian alphabet. We learned Church Slavonic. And, it looked like, looking from the boxes of the manuscripts, this looked like a really good occult text of some kind.
Okay, so it sounds like what he's claiming is that these monks stole the actual Necronomicon and it was written in Greek. So he didn't say if it was written on a tablet or if it was written in papyrus or how it's managed to stay intact for all this time, or what condition it was in, or what the book looked like, or anything.
Wow.
I blame the wizards. The wizards did it. So,
yep.
The Grand Wizard Bill Schnoblin.
And the word in Greek on the front page of the front page, so not really a title page, but front page of the manuscript, was a Greek word, which I looked at, and we agreed, spelled the name Necronomicon. I didn't know.
Really? Okay. Does anybody want to do a quick Google search for the Greek word for Necronomicon? Please. I don't think you're going to find it.
all right, Greek to English. I'll get right back to him now, and I'll look it up.
Okay.
Know what that meant. Neither did my friend. None of us did. It was just a word. Necros seems to,
Because I think necro is Latin.
had something to do with death. We knew that, and so we're going through the diagrams and figuring this must be some kind of book for, summoning the dead or getting in contact with the dead. We didn't really know very much. And it was only when friends of mine, including other people who shall not be named, went up and talked to people who were more knowledgeable in the science fiction fantasy realm. We happened to drop the word, and that's when everybody said, oh, that can't possibly be. That's a fictitious book. Lovecraft invented it. There is no such thing as a Necronomicon. And so we said, well, I don't know. We have a manuscript that's calling itself that. The connection between the Necronomicon that was eventually published and Lovecraft, I think, is tenuous at best. There are some connections that you can make. There are some, there's some language that's somewhat similar, but overall the mood is very similar. This is an idea that this book is written as a kind of battlefield text.
I don't have a copy. I used to have a copy of the Necronomicon, and I forget what happened with it. But if anybody has a copy of the Necronomicon, I think in the front or the back, it explains that it's bullshit. I mean, it's basically just based off of H.P. Lovecraft. So I don't know if anybody happens to have a copy of it available. Maybe if they could take a look at it and see if it does say anything in there.
I don't have mine here, but I know Soren might. Let me go check.
All right. Or, yeah, and also people in the chat, too.
There's an us versus them. There's a kind of Manichaean struggle going on between forces of light and darkness. And it's a book that's sort of dripping with doom, which sort of
dripping with doom. Better clean that up. It's dripping with doom.
There's an us versus them. There's a kind of Manichaean struggle going on between forces of light and darkness. And it's a book that's sort of dripping with doom, which sort of fits in with the Lovecraftian short stories and the Lovecraftian mood, the Lovecraftian atmosphere, I think you could say. So it was published as the Necronomicon. Simon did write, a pretty cogent introduction to it, very involved in the whole process. And at the end, the book came out, and then suddenly all the focus on was, who really is Simon and what was Simon all about, and that became an issue.
Pause it real quick.
Sure.
So they don't have a Necronomicon, but they do have a Necronomicon tarot deck, and I have the book from inside of that, and it's saying that drafts by the early 20th century writings of H.P. Lovecraft and the memorial horrific nightmares plaguing him and his entire life, the omens teaches of the old stories and old tales. Note, these are old tales and stories from a fictional book. This is not true. Please do not assume that these creatures can come and kill you in your nightmares. Yeah, when they have disclaimers like that in a book, but at the same time it is a tarot deck, kind of based off of the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
That it's based off of a book written for fun.
Yeah, because I mean, I do remember back in like when was this? This was in 1980, maybe 89. Yeah, I think maybe 89 or 90. There was when I had heard about the Necronomicon, somebody had mentioned, I forget, I don't know, and again, I don't know who mentioned it to me or where I heard it, but somebody had mentioned that it was like there was this whole superstition behind the Necronomicon, like the people who read it went insane. It was just like completely absurd, completely ridiculous. So of course I had to go out and buy a copy of it and start reading it. But
as much as I love to laugh at you, man, like I was kind of in the same boat when I first came out of Christianity and stuff like that. I bought the Necronomicon, fell in love with the thing. I went on Amazon, bought the dead names, bought the whole thing where it's like all the extra spells, bought the tarot deck. And then when I found out it was complete BS, like I was kind of heartbroken in all honesty. I was like, oh my God, I thought I had this unlimited power source here, and turned out it was just some guy's hoax. So
do you still have a copy of it?
Yes, but I'd have to look for where I put it. So
okay. Did you find the Greek word for Necronomicon? Because I think necro is Latin.
It's just Necronomicon according to Google.
Yeah.
Rich also put that in the chat. So
okay. Thank you. Thanks for doing that. Yeah, because I think necro is Latin for death. And nomicon or lexicon, I don't know, because I think the Latin word for book is biblia. Anyhow, so I mean, Necronomicon itself is a word that's kind of like jumbled together. It's not like a single word. It's obviously made up because it's Latin. Go ahead.
My lovely partner here just handed me my Necronomicon and the Necronomicon spell book, all written by Simon.
Thanks, partner.
Oh, nice.
All right, let's see. So I'll find that cover page you're talking about if you just want to continue.
Okay, sounds good.
Felt that Simon wrote the introduction to this thing, was involved in the translations, as we all were to some extent. We were all involved in one way or the other with this book, and we felt that the focus was wrong. The focus should not be on the
All right, I already found it. All right, the very first page, it says Cthulhu calls. And then there are primeval forces that were worshipped and summoned long before the creation of the Kabbalah. They are the ancient ones of the Sumerian faith, and they live on in the magic of Aleister Crowley and the mythos of H.P. Lovecraft. They wait beyond the gate, ready to rule the earth once again. So they already bring up H.P. Lovecraft right in there.
But does it mention anything about the book being based on H.P. Lovecraft?
No, it says that it is a long-lost sorcerer's handbook, and it contains exorcisms, conjurings, and shouldn't be used lightly.
Okay.
And remember, there are no effective banishings for the forces evoked in the Necronomicon.
And the other thing that, like he's talking about, like, let's say that they did find the manuscript. They should turn it over. Excuse me. They should turn it over to academics, people who understand this, people who understand ancient Greek or ancient Latin or any of the other languages that it may have been written in or partially written in or whatever. For example, the Greek papyrus, the Greek magical papyri, it was made up. There was several scrolls, several papyrus scrolls that they found, and there was a whole team. There was a whole team of like, I don't know, 10 or 12 academics going through and deciphering this and translating it into English and, translating it the best that they could. And we have that today. And it's a fantastic magical resource if anybody ever wants to look into it. It's called the Magical Papyrus. But that's an example of what you should do if you happen to stumble across an ancient manuscript that you think is pretty old. You bring it to the attention of academics, because there's also been books that were proven to be complete bullshit. For example, the Gospel of Barnabas is completely bullshit. It's completely made up. So, you know, there are hoaxes out there. And, you know, so the best thing to do is to actually give it to an academic, not keep it with a bunch of people who are swapping priests like some kind of a 60s swinger party for religion.
The focus should be on the material itself. So people started going underground. The friend of mine who ran the church, who had hired the monks who stole the books, these guys got arrested. It was the largest rare book heist in North American history. You could read about it online. It's in newspapers and stuff from that period, from the 1970s. These were serious guys. These were ripping off collections everywhere in North America, in Canada, the United States, and in Mexico. They were every place. They were stealing books. And they got convicted for it. They went to jail for it. And my friend got so...
you know, now I'm going to have to look that up.
Paranoid about this and so worried that he began burning everything he had.
What? Don't say.
Okay.
That's like burning the Library of Alexandria. Ugh.
That could connect him back to these two, not wanting to go to...
It's so cringy for me to hear anybody who talks about destroying, burning any ancient antiquity item, like a statue like they did in Iran, where they just ISIS went in and just destroyed all of these ancient Babylonian and Sumerian statues that are just destroyed now, that were thousands of years old. So please don't burn books. Please don't destroy art. Please don't destroy ancient images.
It's sad when that kind of stuff happens, and I hate it because they're destroying our past. They're destroying what everybody held dear in the past, and what we look to remember or find out about how we lived, what we believed, and stuff like that. And you can't just go back and go, oh, look, I restored it. You'll never be the way that it once was. And that's why it sucks. And that's why when people's like, oh yeah, that I'm going to burn this. I say, no, don't burn that. Put it up, lock it away, put it in a box somewhere, put it where it can be saved for future generations, or donate it. Don't fucking burn it. Don't destroy it.
Yeah, there was a group of militia that were they were ISIS soldiers, and they just went into this archaeological place and they just started ripping down statues, just completely just destroying them, just turning them to rubble. I mean, there's no way they could. I mean, I don't know. I think it would be nearly impossible to have gone back in and restored those statues, because I don't know what happened afterwards. I'm assuming that they probably just completely destroyed them to just rubble. But yeah, I mean, it's just, and that's something that's going to be lost forever. We're never ever going to see those again.
No, and it's sad.
Yeah, it is.
To jail himself, obviously. So all of that was destroyed. A lot of stuff was destroyed. I didn't know about all of this until a bit later, because I was in and out of contact with him. And then later I found out he had died rather mysteriously. Again, this is all stuff that can be verified. I'm not making any of this up. He died mysteriously after his father had committed suicide.
So how did he die? What was so mysterious about it? Are you going to explain that? Or are you just going to say he died under mysterious circumstances, move on to the next topic?
Then he either killed himself or was killed.
So committing suicide, unfortunately, is not an unusual circumstance. People commit suicide all the time. They shouldn't, but they do.
There's a long story about that as well, but it goes back again to the Orthodox churches, to politics, to churches operating as fronts and all of this. So the Necronomicon was kind of a footnote to the rest of all the things that were going on at that time, all the things that we were involved with.
And that brings us to a lot of questions in different directions. So to begin, the Necronomicon, the manuscript, did you ever figure out the origin? I mean, this obviously, as you said, it was a Greek manuscript. Do you know what? I mean, do you know what year we're speaking of? I mean, was it basically a retranslation from a much older text, or was it an ancient manuscript that was found?
Well, I believe it was a retranslation of something older than the text itself, because a lot of the prayers to us look like gibberish. I mean, what?
Then how do you know that they were prayers?
It was in Greek. And it wasn't any language that we could readily identify.
So again, if you can't recognize the language, you don't know what it was saying, how do you know that they were prayers? I mean, what distinguishes one type of information written in a text from another? I mean, you don't just see it. I mean, that's, if you don't understand what the language is, you don't, I mean, for all you know, it could have been a recipe or somebody talking about what they did the other day. It could have been like a diary.
Good thing is we had friends at the University of Pennsylvania, people who were involved in occult stuff as well. A circle of us around a group in Brooklyn that were really interested in all of this at that time. It was a very popular subject in those days, in the 1970s in New York. And there was a bookstore called Magical Child. It had originally been called the Warlock Shop in Brooklyn Heights.
Yeah, the Magical Child did exist because it was also a publishing company. Not a very trustworthy publishing company because they ripped off the Ferrars, but nonetheless, they were an actual publishing company.
Actually, a block or two from where Lovecraft lived when he lived in Brooklyn. Then they moved to Manhattan, and it was called the Magical Child, and it attracted a lot of people. I mean, John Lennon and Yoko Ono used to go there and buy books. And we saw them. We saw a lot of people would stop by. It was a kind of a magnet. And we knew some of the students, some of the people who were studying ancient languages, both in New York and at the University of Pennsylvania, which became more serious because they were able to help us and recognize some of the language as sounding like it was Babylonian, Akkadian, or Sumerian. And that's what led us in that direction. We began to realize we were looking at something which was a survival of something that was much, much older.
Indeed. In fact, I mean, I have my own interest in the Necronomicon because I was investigating a mental hospital in New Jersey called Greystone. And if you recall, one of the Necronomicon versions talks about the mad Arab who tells the story. You know, he came across these cloaked figures doing a satanic ritual around a gray stone. And the stone basically was levitating. And that's kind of the opening, his initiation into the magical world, the narrator's initiation. And I always found it interesting because Greystone, we also found, was a hub for a lot of satanic rituals. We found a lot of markings and indications of Satanists. In fact, we even found...
Oh, God. Basically, what you found is what a bunch of teenage stupid-ass vandals decided to do because they decided to be edgy and try to do rituals in an abandoned place to try to stir up spirits or to try to contact the dead or just to be dumb fucking kids. You found graffiti from teenagers. Congratulations.
Yeah, really. So, I mean, if it did happen and, you know, yeah, so it's probably a bunch of people getting high or drinking in a certain spot. They, you know, be away from prying eyes, and they spray painted the place. That's the extent of their satanic ritual space usage.
Yeah, or they're just like, hey, let's be edgy. I have a Ouija board. Let's draw all these things around here and make it look like it's haunted. It was probably a bunch of dumb-ass kids who did all that stuff, and he is one of those people like we know of on here all the time where we want to do these damn videos that look way too deep into something that doesn't need to be looked into deep, that already has an explanation, like the other guy said that church leaders like, oh, that's a fictitious fake book that somebody wrote just for scares and giggles. And he's like, oh, thinking, oh, no, it's not. It's his holy text. So they're just a bunch of crazy words.
of a Necronomicon buried inside, deep inside the hospital, indicating someone had come there with the book, either to bury it or to do rituals with it. So there's this interesting nexus of, as you understand from your Sinister Forces work, locations, places where rituals are performed and conducted for ritual purposes.
Well, there was a lot of rumors around in the late 70s that there was a cult operating out of Vineland, New Jersey, and that there was a mental hospital there that was the target or the nexus of this kind of activity, which we were never able to find out at that time. I mean, there was no internet in those days, so everything was word of mouth, or you had to really do a lot of footwork and research things in libraries and archives and stuff. So it was took a lot of time. But that was the rumor that was persistent, that there was something going on in Vineland. I don't know if that connects at all to Greystone or not, but that was the story that was going around in the 1970s.
Hospital would have been nearby there?
All I know was Vineland, New Jersey, and it was a mental hospital. There couldn't have been too many.
Right, yeah. And then, of course, you have your own interconnection then to the Son of Sam mystery, which I know you commented upon in Sinister Forces. But take us through that a little bit, because here's a lot of people like Maury Terry did good works, basically saying Berkowitz was not the lone shooter, that he was part of a satanic cult. And
no doubt in my mind.
This does seem to intersect a little bit with what you're speaking about here, with not only these churches and fronts, but the locations being very interesting, being like near Rockland, for example, which is a notoriously haunted location.
I love how they put things together. So if somebody lives in an area or something happens in an area related to something somehow, regardless of how many years have passed, somehow instantly those two things become related. I've never understood that. It's like, how do they make these connections? It's just like, oh, it's weird. This is weird too. Hey, they must be connected.
Full of places like Letchworth Village, which was a haunted site with a lot of satanic ritual activity going on there. You have Hudson Valley, where there have been notorious sightings.
And I love how they just say these matter-of-fact things, like, "Oh yeah, there was a lot of satanic activity going on." What
as everybody knows?
What apparently what in your mind makes up satanic stuff? Somebody writing Iron Maiden and 666 in spray paint? Is that what makes up satanic activity? Or is it like an actual group of people who are dressed in robes with an altar and a naked woman upon it, and they're doing a black mass? I mean, what is your definition of satanic ritual? So bizarre.
Lights in the sky. The Rockefeller Estates are there next to Sleepy Hollow.
To put it into a frame of reference, it's like saying that somebody's Halloween celebration, where they're dressed as a mummy and handing out candy, is the entire thing of what witchcraft is. It's just completely ridiculous. It's like those two things. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that witchcraft is that and that is witchcraft. There's so much more to all of these things.
Legendary Sleepy Hollow. So that's not, so tell us a little bit about what you discovered as far as the Berkowitz and Son of Sam shooting, and what cult is operating in that context.
Well, this takes us, down the rabbit hole a few steps. The Son of Sam shootings were happening when I was living in New York, in Brooklyn at the time, and we all knew, the people, the sort of circle of our friends and colleagues, that we knew that there was more than one person in the Son of Sam cult. I mean, the rumors spread like wildfire. People were talking about it constantly. It was something that you felt all the time. And Maury Terry writes about a connection to the Son of Sam cult through a film producer called Roy Radin. Roy Radin at one point approached friends of mine and myself. He wanted to film rituals. He wanted to film, actual rituals taking place. He wanted to film something spooky, something, like conjuring a demon to visible appearance or something. So we stayed away from him because he looked a little strange, and he seemed a little bit unhealthy, in his interests. But the Son of Sam thing was going on at the time, and there was this. Maury Terry brings out this connection to something called the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Well, the Process is kind of an offshoot of Scientology, or members of Scientology created the Process Church, and we saw them around town all the time as well. And we didn't know if there was any actual connection to Son of Sam until much later. But what I find that is fascinating to me, and I just discovered this a few years ago, was that the man who came up with the name, the Process Church of the Final Judgment, and the man who incorporated Process Church was Tommy Jude Baumler. And Tommy Baumler worked as a lawyer and an investigator out of Guy Bannister's office initially. He was a person who was deeply involved with David Ferry, with Jack Martin, with all those characters from the New Orleans end of the Kennedy assassination.
So are you kind of following this weird rabbit trail? It's like, okay, so this guy knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy who was involved in this. It's like, what the fuck is the connection?
Conspiracy. And he's the guy who actually incorporated the Process Church. He came up with the name. The connections are very bizarre and very, very astonishing. We knew the Process Church. We knew them. They were spending a lot of time trying to look sinister and mysterious. And they did the thing with the German shepherds was their totem. They dressed in black. They worshiped both the devil and Jesus and Jehovah. It was quite a heady mixture. But in the years,
how do you worship both Jesus and the devil?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not ever from what 12 minutes ago or 16 minutes ago. I don't believe anything that came out of this guy's mouth.
I kind of stopped listening to this guy because I went thinking bullshit. So I don't believe anything coming from his mouth except for when people tell him, no, it's this. And he's like, it was actually really this. I believe the other people more than him.
Yeah.
And I don't even know these people.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of buying his story up until the point that he said that he was welcomed into Kennedy's funeral home because he was dressed like, a priest of some other religion that was down the street. I mean, it's just at that point, it's just kind of like, okay, whatever this guy's talking about is bullshit, because that just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think you can be, let's say, a priest of, I mean, okay, let's say if you were a Christian, let's say you were a Catholic priest and there was another Catholic church, maybe talking to the leader of that church or the diocese or whatever you have to go through, maybe then you could visit a church, but you couldn't just walk into a church and just start acting like one of the priests there. First of all, the congregation would wonder who you are. The priests themselves would wonder who you are. The groundskeepers would wonder who you are. I mean, and definitely if it's the president of the United States, who was recently murdered, his funeral, the FBI definitely would have a list of who is a priest at that church. Probably they probably got to filter out who could attend that funeral. And I mean, right after he just rattled off all that nonsense, I was like, yeah, I don't think so.
Members of the Process at that time have come out and acknowledged that Berkowitz was part of this, that they were part of this cult that was going around killing people, basically. That what Berkowitz said was true.
Yeah, I'll have to research it, but Son of Sam, and Berkowitz. I think Berkowitz is the son of Sam. Those two things, I think that's the same thing. But anyhow, that was an individual. It wasn't a cult. Son of Sam was an individual. And I think if somebody doesn't mind looking that up, I think the son of Sam is Berkowitz.
Berkowitz is still in jail. He's never getting out. He knows that. But he has actually come clean on the murders that he did commit and the ones he did not commit. He has no reason to lie about it at this point. He's never getting out of jail. He's an admitted murderer, multiple murderer. But we knew that there were killings that were sort of off from the other killings. We knew there had to be more than one person doing it.
Then why didn't he make a plea to try and get his sentence reduced by naming other people?
And as it turned out, I think we've been proven right. The Son of Sam killings were part of Occult.
Then also, after they captured Berkowitz, did the killings stop or did they continue?
New York was full of this kind of activity at that time. It was replete. We had the witchcraft phenomenon had just started. So you had the Gardnerian witchcraft, you had Ray Buckland, you had Leo Martin.
Ray Buckland was a Gardnerian, you fucking idiot. He was pretty much the one who brought Gardnerian to the United States.
Hello, you had all kinds of people who were pretty famous in this particular field, promoting witchcraft as a religion, promoting it heavily on the media. And that was just the surface. Then you had the Church of Satan crowd, and then you had the Temple of Set people. You had a lot of groups that were very, very active in New York City and New Jersey.
Whatever.
Who were involved in the esoteric stuff. So this was something that was going on. We all knew it. We all knew who was in it. We all knew, who to stay away from, or who you'd want to talk to, who was interesting and who wasn't. This was all part of the atmosphere at that time. So yeah, the Process Church, David Berkowitz, the cult, no doubt in my mind. Maury Terry may have gotten some things wrong here and there, or he may have overreached in certain places, but the basic story, I think, is pretty solid. And I've talked to some of the police investigators and detectives who worked on that case. They're still around, and I've talked to them a number of times in the past, and they are absolutely convinced of the existence of a cult that was involved in these murders.
So one of the things that really drives me nuts about people like this is they just they'll tell this story and they'll just kind of like weave elements to it to keep it sort of shocking, but they never actually lead to any conclusive anything. You know what I mean? They just talk about these horrendous events and then just kind of like blend them into their story, hoping that whoever's hearing the story just associates, like let's say the occult and witchcraft and Satanism with Son of Sam and, this belief that there's a cult going around murdering people and there's this ancient book of the Necronomicon that's hidden in this church so it's just like it's all of these elements, but it doesn't. So what does it mean? I mean, it's all bullshit, but even so, what does it mean? What's the horrible thing that happened with this book? And also he hasn't gotten to it, but whatever happened with this book, because apparently it's been found and now it's known by a certain number of people, but we don't know what's happened with this book. He's off talking about Son of Sam and police who are convinced there's some kind of a cult going around ritualistically murdering people for Satan for whatever reason. I guess maybe hoping to do a spell so they get a tax refund. I don't know. What are they doing?
But don't you feel that the publishing of the Necronomicon actually helped to fuel these kinds of occult activities? I mean, what was the ultimate purpose behind publishing these kind of grimoires, making it accessible to groups like this that we're speaking of?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question, because people have tried to draw a solid line between the Necronomicon and and cult activity of various kinds. Some people have taken.
See, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, because he could have been able, if he actually studied this and researched it, he could have actually made connections between, let's say, the Necronomicon and the magic of Abramelin the Mage, who believed that you could, Aleister Crowley even did this, has this great ceremony at the house of Bolinsky, the Bolinsky house. I can't, my brain is not working. But you could have connected it to that. I mean, there is some, just the stories about those books are similar. Boleskine House in Scotland. but he was doing that ritual from Abramelin the mage to contact his higher spirit self, his Iwas, his higher self.
The Necronomicon quite seriously. I wrote a book about it, involving Kenneth Grant, a very famous occultist in England, who was very much involved in the whole Lovecraftian mythos, and involved specifically with the Necronomicon, with which I was involved. So, there is that, but that was a very serious, very sober sort of approach to esotericism. That wasn't going out and killing people in the name of Satan or something. I think the Satanic Bible had an effect on that as well, on that whole milieu of the whole idea of that there was an occult, there was kind of an acceptable occultism in North America. I think, that contributed to it as well. But I think the Necronomicon, because it was so controversial, attracted a lot of critics as well as it did supporters. And I think that controversy was greater for the Necronomicon than it was, for instance, for the Satanic Bible, which is what it is. There's no real controversy surrounding it. But with the Necronomicon, there was controversy. There's a lot of people, pointing fingers and trying to find, is it real, is it not real? People saying it doesn't matter if it's real or not real, it works or it doesn't work, on and on. So you have a lot of people on both sides of that argument.
So the church that you've been hinting at throughout, that you were part of,
Yeah.
the American Orthodox Catholic Church, right? Most people will never have heard of. What role did this American Orthodox Church play in actually disseminating, for example, the Necronomicon? Or what did you ultimately find that they were involved with that made you realize that this is actually a front for something much more conspiratorial? That's it.
Well, the American Orthodox Catholic Church.
What exactly is the conspiracy here?
I don't know.
no
I mean, the last thing I remember him saying about the Necronomicon at the original existing, as I do air quotations and no one can see, was that it was burned with a bunch of books that the guy was trying to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, okay, that's a convenient excuse to why you don't know where it's at. But at the same time, it looks like he's making weird links and jumps in his own head and just connecting them to whatever he can connect them to make it seem like it's a legit real thing. But like you said, he obviously has not really done much research on it.
Yeah.
Most of this is his own fantasy world.
Here's one thing I've wondered a lot about the whole Necronomicon thing now, though. It's been out for like over 40 some odd years now, but how come all the great spells in there haven't happened yet? Like, you have never seen the stars tremble and fall and stuff like that. I've never seen the storms raise and a monster come out. Like, there's kind of things you can poke holes in the whole theory that the book is true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's just okay. So he's established this in the story that he's weaving together. He's established, okay, this is the supposed Necronomicon book exists, and then he went on some tangent about the son of Sam, the son of Sam, and the police, and how easy it was to infiltrate this church, and he also tied it somehow to the death of Kennedy, talking about that. But what conspiracy? I mean, he hasn't really gotten to that point. So I guess now he's going to start building up this story. And it's just so frustrating the way that he paints this. He's talking about, because during the 60s, witchcraft was pretty popular or 60s, 70s, witchcraft was pretty popular in New York because that's, people started hearing about it from England. Buckland had just come over, and there was I don't want to say resurgence, but there was a lot of interest in paganism and witchcraft that came out of the 60s. And I think it was a very healthy thing because it led to what we have today. We have druids and pagans and witches and people who are trying to sort of reestablish what our ancient ancestors, depending upon what culture you base your practice on, or maybe people are more eclectic and they try to kind of just mix and match and create their own thing. But I mean, pretty much a lot of that came out of the 60s. But there was nothing negative about it. It was actually a positive thing. And then the 80s came about. They tried to claim there was some kind of satanic ritual abuse going on and Satanists running around killing people, which, by the way, have never been proven to actually exist.
Yeah. Somebody, Rich looked up the Son of Sam thing and has it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
It's just I really suck at reading out loud.
Okay. Where did he start? Okay. 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 So he was talking about, yeah, they wouldn't have let you in unless you were vetted by the Secret Service. Agreed, Rich. Yeah. It was David Berkowitz. Yeah. So he was Son of Sam. Still alive at the age of 64. Full name Richard David Falca. Oh, okay. So his name wasn't David Berkowitz. A few weeks after his arrest and confession, Berkowitz was permitted to communicate with the press in a letter to the New York Post dated September 19, 1979. Alluded to his original story of demonic possession with close with a warning that has been interpreted by some investigation as a mission of criminal accomplices. There are other sons out there. God help the world. Oh, okay, yeah. So he claims that there's other people out there, but again, the murders stopped after he was arrested. So, you know.
It was not disseminating the Necronomicon. What happened was the friend and I that I mentioned, who's passed away now, so I guess I can refer to him, was William Prosky. He and I joined the American Orthodox Catholic Church in 1968 and 69. And at the end of 69, we were actually also in the process of formulating our own version of all of this called the Slavonic Orthodox Church. So there was this going on. So there were different churches involved. The Necronomicon, there's a solid line between the Necronomicon and the Slavonic Orthodox Church. That's where that connection is.
Really? What line? Do people just randomly slap stuff together hoping nobody's going to ask a question like, what is the connection?
It's very bewildering. Believe me, I know. There's a lot of churches with a lot of similar names in this story, which makes it very confusing to anybody trying to do the research. The American Orthodox Catholic Church was run by a man called Profeta. Profeta was a Ukrainian priest who had started this church, which he claimed he had started in conjunction with some operation of JFK.
Profeta, isn't that a type of cheese you put on pizzas?
Oh man, I'm more of a mozzarella guy, so.
That's prosciutto you're thinking of, and prosciutto is not a cheese; it's a meat. But no.
Isn't it a cross between provolone and feta cheese?
Yes. As far as I know,
it's really good on like sausage pizza.
Yeah, I don't know if it's prosciutto or if it's something else. Brandy, you're the cheese person. Is prosciutto a cheese?
It's a meat. Very salty ham.
But yeah, it's a very salty. It's a salted ham that's expensive as crap. Now I'm remembering. My brain is half dead.
It's very thin.
It's part of a charcuterie platter.
What you have with cheese and wine.
It's what you have with cheese and wine. It's a meat that goes with cheese and wine.
Okay. Thank you for that, Loki. Really appreciate your salami knowledge.
The knowing of meats.
Surprisingly very knowledgeable on meats for a lesbian.
I know. Why is that? Why am I knowledgeable on meats for a lesbian? I don't know. I know. I know Brandy's knowledgeable on knowledgeable
so
on
sausage.
Yeah, I know a lot about sausage and meat. Hell yeah, but not on men. I don't know anything about that on you guys. Yeah, icky.
So if you wanted to be a bishop in this church, you had to be vetted by the FBI, and that's where Jack Martin came in. I was just managed to see Jim Garrison's papers.
So why would the FBI care who's climbing up the ranks of a religious order? And why would you have to be vetted through the FBI? Am I just am I just am I confused about all this, or does this not make sense to other people?
I can see where you're getting at. Yeah, I don't even think the guy knows where he's getting at with this. So
I don't know either what the guy is going at, but all I'm thinking is, as far as I know, the FBI doesn't care who believes in what.
Yeah. The only thing that I know of is like for example, there's the Ninja Society in San Francisco, and people who join the San Francisco Ninja Society, they have to register with the FBI. The FBI has to know, you know, if they're getting trained for this. But this is the same thing with any other martial art, like karate and kung fu and even kendo. So for that, you have to register. You have to fill out like a little piece of paper, and you're essentially registered with the FBI. But the FBI doesn't like approve or disprove you. I mean, so and why would the FBI care if you're joining a particular religious order or not? That doesn't make any. I'm going to back it up. This guy just doesn't make any sense.
The church.
He's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
He is.
Headed by the FBI.
Damn it, I missed that.
He had started in conjunction.
it's like Rich right now. You guys read the chat? Rich is like, stop talking about sausage. You're making my mouth water.
Operation of J. Edgar Hoover. So if you wanted to be a bishop in this church, you had to be vetted by the FBI.
See, that doesn't make any sense. If you wanted to be a bishop in this church, you had to be vetted by the FBI. That makes absolutely no fucking sense.
And that's where Jack Martin came in. I was just managed to see Jim Garrison's papers on the Clay Shaw trial. I've been trying to get a hold of him for a long time because I knew there'd be something in there. Garrison was following the story of the churches, and he was as confused as anyone else, and he kind of gave up on it and told them.
Not as confused as you, though, I bet.
The House Subcommittee on Assassinations, look into the churches. There's something fishy. I just don't know what it is. As it turned out, when I finally saw the papers, I realized for sure, I mean, with beyond any doubt at all, that the stationery that I had been typing on when I was in that church and the signatures that I had seen at that church were being sent to Garrison, trying to get Jack Martin released and sent back to them so that he would not be one of the witnesses in the Clay Shaw trial. So at that point, I realized, I mean, I know David Ferry was a member of the church. We found his documentation, his consecration papers. We know Jack Martin was, Tommy Bonler was. A lot of these people were members of this church, and they had no religious training. They did not conduct any services. They did nothing religious except dress the part when they had to. And I think you should realize that in those days, a priest could go almost anywhere, unchallenged. It's not like today where we sort of look at priests suspiciously these days. But in those days, if you were dressed with a Roman collar and you had the black robes on, nobody stopped you. You could walk into practically a high security installation where you walk.
No, that's bullshit.
That'd make assassinations a lot easier, man.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into a federal building, you're dressed as a priest, they're patting you down. I mean, come on, that's utter bullshit. Yeah, for the most part, anybody can walk around anywhere they want. Nobody's going to bother them because it's out in the public. But if you go into a private area, yeah, you have to have a reason to be there. They're not just going to let you walk in just because you're dressed like, you know, some bishop from some church in the middle of the Bronx.
You walked into the RFK funeral procession at the St. Patrick's Cathedral. So
that was only one of the ones we gate crashed at the time. That was the most famous one.
Why are they going around crashing funerals?
Well, you've seen Wedding Crashers, man.
Sorry.
Well, in Wedding Crashers, there's a part where those guys go crash one guy's funeral and stuff like that near the end. So maybe they're looking for some good tale.
I don't know. I'm just like, why is that even a thing? Why is funeral crashing a thing? I mean, I've been to funerals. They're sad. They're depressing. Why would you want to crash that?
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I can understand, yeah, if there was a president of the United States, you might want to get in, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who probably wanted to attend that and just couldn't. And one of the reasons is because it was probably invite only, and they were only letting in, you know, family members, other politicians, people from around the world or whatever. And there's also a lot of funerals that are very private. You know,
So nobody would stop you. You get on a public transportation, they wouldn't charge you.
What? I don't think so.
You rode for free, which when we were a couple of high school kids, that was great. So this is the kind of thing that happens. So if you could go and visit someone in the hospital in critical care in the middle of the night, way after visiting hours, nobody would stop you.
I'm having such a hard time believing this guy.
And we began to realize that the possibilities for abuse were enormous. And we saw people coming in and out of the church all the time from foreign countries. We had somebody coming in from Nigeria. We had someone coming in from Italy. We had people coming in to get consecrated, quote unquote, as bishops. They would get their piece of paper. There might be a ritual laying on of hands, something, just for pro forma's sake. Then they pack up and go on the next plane and perform some intelligence operation somewhere around.
So these bishops were just getting their little piece of paper and getting hands laid on them, and then they're going off doing intelligence work. What? I got to back that up. I missed something.
Yeah.
There might be a ritual laying on of hands, something, just for pro forma's sake. Then they pack up and go on the next plane and perform some intelligence operation somewhere around the world.
Let me bless you, my child, and go do some espionage right after this. That is basically what he's saying.
Yes. So I kind of have this movie going on in my head, and I think I'm going to share it with some of you. I have a James Bond type situation where he's, stealing cars and breaking into places and shooting guns and boxing people and getting the girl and all that. But he's dressed like a bishop with a a conical hat and, like all the vestment hanging down and Bishop, James Bishop.
So I spoke to some of the bishops who were part of this. I went back to them years later after I had left all of this behind and did the research, talked to them, and they admitted, that they had to be vetted by the FBI before they could be, part of the church. And some of them simply refused to do it and they broke away. But the man who did the vetting was Jack Martin, the man who actually was the person, the go-to guy to find out who was reliable or who was acceptable and who wasn't.
And for people who don't know, who Jack Martin is, in the film JFK, Jack Lemmon plays Jack Martin, who is Guy Bannister's associate, right? And Bannister is basically the former FBI guy who is running this this sort of anti-Cuban activities down in New Orleans, right? And he's got Lee Harvey Oswald walking in and out of his office down on Camp Street. So
Martin at one point wants to blow a whistle, or he just makes a joke of writing a book, and then Bannister goes nuts and pistol whips him.
Right.
Yeah, this is the Jack Martin. This is the Jack Martin that we're talking about. I have photographs of Jack Martin dressed as a priest.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Can we see them? You didn't happen to bring it for this interview, even though you'd be talking about this. You didn't bring those photographs?
I'd like to see them too.
Yes.
Nope, he left them into the notebook.
Also in the film JFK, there's like the scene when David Ferry is basically, he throughout the story they hint at the fact.
I mean, okay, so I don't know how many subscribers how big this thing is because I've never really heard of it before. But you're going on to a YouTube channel and you're going to be talking about this. Don't you want to have any historical information, pictures, anything relevant to what you're talking about, easily accessible? That's the other thing that drives me nuts about these things, is they just talk about this stuff and then they say they have this. but they don't actually produce it. Yes, I have the Ark of the Covenant somewhere, but I'm not going to bring it out and show it to you guys because, you know, even though we're talking about the Ark of the Covenant and I claim that I have it, I'm still not going to show it to you. You're just going to have to take my word for it.
Well, I guess your word is good enough. Yep.
Have to go with that.
Wanted to be a priest, though, and he basically was defrocked because of his homosexuality. But then when they come to his apartment, you see an image of him dressed as a bishop, and you see all these black robes. You're saying he's actually a wandering bishop of this American Orthodox Church.
Absolutely. There's no way he would have been kicked out of the American Orthodox Catholic Church for homosexuality. Okay, that is a joke. There is absolutely no way. That might have been a qualification. I don't know. But there's no way he would have been kicked out on the basis of that. Right. Impossible. Okay, just take it from me. I was there. I saw what was going on in that place. I saw FBI agents coming in one day, and I saw all kinds of other stuff happening another day. There was no way Ferry would have been kicked out for that reason.
So we still haven't gotten to the conspiracy part yet, have we?
No, and I don't see how that's connected to that book either.
Yeah.
He might have been refused to be a Catholic priest, you know, possibly. Except that, you know, my conversations with Catholic priests were very indiscreet. They would tell us, you know, well, you know, in the seminary, you fall into two camps, you know, the jocks and those who were not the jocks. And, you know, there was the gay component in the seminary, and there were the people who were out there playing basketball until 2 o'clock in the morning because of the celibacy rules. So, no, there's no way he would have been kicked out for homosexuality. That's just no way.
Hey guys. Hey, how's it going? Today I'm going to show you what awesome.
Oh, you're putting ads in here too, man. What the heck?
I know.
Down for homosexuality. That's just no way. That's a canard.
Well, this connection between the ritual nature of power, let's say, the occult facets of it. I think this is part of why you've been interested by Nazism throughout your life, as far as studying it, you know, doing your first book on Holy Alliance.
Okay, so they just got done talking about the Necronomicon and the churches and all this other crap, and they never got to anything. So now, oh, okay, let's throw the Nazis in there. Let's talk about the Nazis. Everybody hates the Nazis. Sure, let's associate it with occultism. And I don't understand where this whole theory, idea, concept, belief, hint, assumption that somehow people in power are doing some kind of occult rituals to take over the world. I mean,
but I'm looking at the title of the video, Comic-Con and the government's occult truths. So basically, it's a mix of a little bit of what he talked to before, and now he's talking about the government mixing into all this. All I can see is it's one conspiracy theory blending into another, into another, into another. That's not actually blending very well. It's just random stuff they're throwing out about these things.
Yeah. I mean, back in my day when I was a teenager, kind of like the weird people, or kind of like the outcasts were the ones who studied the occult. It was kind of the outsiders did that. They were treated sort of like, kind of weird people. They usually doodled and had weird ideas and smoked pot and drank and went to parties and stuff like that. And they were the outcasts, but they were the ones who studied the occult, and they were the ones who really had quite, really understood it and really studied it and got books and, really got into it. But none of them ever became like politicians. None of them started running for the mayor, of the city or the presidency, or they didn't care about any of that, So I don't know what happens. So you become a politician, and then one day they just dump a whole bunch of books onto your desk and say, okay, you've got to read all of these books and understand the occult because we've got a ritual tonight to take over the world. How do they believe that all this stuff actually goes down? I understand they have this idea of it. They have this concept of it. But how does it actually work in the real world? And why does nobody ever know about this? Except these crazy, whacked out people on YouTube.
Who knows?
You gotta get woke, man. You gotta get woke.
Yeah, I guess so. They do not know the way.
Most recently, the Hitler legacy. Is that really what drew you to the story of the Nazis, the rat lines? I mean, what was it that really hooked your interest and said, you know what, I want to know more about what's going on there?
Because we live in a country where we have this kind of artificial division that we think exists between the church and the state. We've compartmentalized our lives. And we think this compartmentalization exists on all levels of American political discourse. And it doesn't. When we have politicians who have sometimes very strange beliefs, you know, and because we're not supposed to talk.
Strange beliefs? You mean like Christians, Protestants, Lutherans? You mean strange beliefs like that? They believe in those crazy stuff, like some kind of a weird heaven, some kind of a God figure that watches them 24/7? Is that the weird kind of beliefs that you're hinting at? Or are you hinting at some other weird beliefs?
Talk about it because of this legal separation. We don't realize that motivation for some political actions are based on some very strange ideas.
You mean like abortion? You mean like the fact that a woman cannot choose whether or not she wants to have a child or not? Basically, it's God's seed, so she has to have a child despite the fact that she doesn't know who the father is. Or maybe she does know who the father is, but she doesn't want to associate with the father because she was raped. Or maybe she's in a position where she doesn't want to have a child because she wants to go to school or get a career or whatever. You mean strange beliefs like that? Crossing lines of church and state?
I mean, Ronald Reagan believed in the end times. You know, he believed that the apocalypse was about to come on us. He belonged to a denomination called the Disciples of Christ, the same denomination that Jim Jones belonged to, of Jonestown in Guyana. You have to look, I think, a little deeper. When I became fascinated by extreme religion and extreme politics, and to see how sometimes they went hand in hand. So Unholy Alliance was my first book. It was about, of course, Nazis and occultism, and the occult beliefs that fueled the Nazis. And it's based on documents in the National Archives. There have been so many books until then that have been speculation or just stuff made up out of whole cloth.
You know, one day I'm going to have to really do a good deep research into Nazis and the occult. So I haven't done that yet, but from my understanding is that Heinrich Himmler was very much into the occult. And Adolf Hitler pretty much just let, you know, Heinrich Himmler do whatever he wants, the same thing he did with all of his other high-ranking officers. Adolf Hitler himself was a Christian. He believed that he was doing Christian work. The national religion of Germany at the time was mostly Christian. They believed in God. They thought that they were doing God's will. They even had on their belt buckles. Heinrich Himmler was the one who was very much interested in using occult symbolism, especially the symbolism that's associated with the their chosen people, the Aryan. And when I say Aryan, I mean of the European descent, European peoples, especially the Germanic tribes peoples. And they were very much into using that symbolism to reconnect with their motherland and their fatherland, that whole ancestral connection of, you know, the Norse people, the Germans, the war men, the people who were conquerors. And that's what they used it for. Heinrich Himmler was really the only one who was actually interested in the occult and studied it and had books, quite an extensive collection of it. And he was also, I believe, one of the people who also was in charge of the propaganda of the Germanic peoples and creating all these rituals that were, you know, done in the big, huge, I forget what it's called, the little area where Adolf Hitler gave his speeches, and they had, children walking up and down with flowers and torches and all this stuff. But it was supposed to be on a grand scale, this sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Not really ritual, but this kind of it's a ceremony. It was supposed to be very ceremonial, and that's my understanding to the extent of the Nazis and the occult. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I'm just waiting for a real life version of Nazi zombies.
So am I on the Nazi zombies, but for the most part, for me, the occult ties to the Nazis are mostly through Himmler and some of that research he did. But other than that, that's about the only ties I can think of between them. And honestly, I hate it that people say if you're a Satanist or something like that, or white supremacist, you're pretty much the same thing as not. Sorry, say that last part. If you're an occultist, or if you're a practicing witch or pagan, that you're a Nazi, or that you believe in those ideologies and stuff like that. All I know is Hitler and a lot of his people were crazy and did really whacked out shit. And I don't understand why they always have to connect them.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was so relieved when I was actually accidentally found a lot of microfilm footage at the National Archives in Washington that demonstrate the Nazis were fascinated, even obsessed, with occultism and esotericism, and that formed the basis of Unholy Alliance. And that was really only going to be a chapter of Sinister Forces. I thought maybe one chapter on this, but it got out of hand. There's just so much there. When you're looking at the most hate,
Sinister Forces, a grimoire of American political witchcraft. Oh, okay. So yeah, this sounds like a really, really well-researched book. Oh yeah.
A group of people in the 20th century, at least to us in the West, were the Nazis. They're the symbols of evil, and yet they were really just a cult. They were not a political party, the way we understand it. The Nazi Party was a cult, and that's
it was the National Socialist Workers Party. That's what it was called, or something close to that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and just pause it here, and we can start it up later at 31:16. But it's already almost 9 o'clock. So
yeah,
I was hoping you'd get more into the Necronomicon, though.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there at the Necronomicon that we just kind of skipped over.
He skipped over a majority of it. He was just saying the origins of it. Well, what he claims are the origins of it.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to put the time in there. Do we have it? Yeah. So, I mean, it's just a lot of these people, what they do is they just kind of like figure out some way to sort of tie these ends together, because the occult becomes just like this unusual thing that's kind of, sort of dark and mysterious. And they kind of like, they can start throwing everything in there because there's no real central authority to occultism. It's pretty much just, random people take up studying it. And now because we have the internet and groups and stuff like that, people actually communicate. But there's no, yeah, it's so ridiculous. Anyway. All righty. So thank you all so much. We will see you next Sunday. And again, the first week of March, we'll have an update on Dungeons and Dragons. And what we're going to do is we're going to play it in the chat here. You all can participate or watch. And we're going to see. Hopefully it'll be pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm hoping so.
Yeah, and if you're interested, please contact one of us or Loki's Witch. Loki's Witch is probably the best person to contact because she's going to be the head honcho, the DM of it all.
And I look forward to anyone who wants to participate.
All righty, all. Dorian, Loki, thank you all so much to chat. Thank you all for showing up, and we'll see you next week.
Night.
See you guys next week.